Hi everyone, I want to give you an update on my Abattoir of Zir Pen RF build. I've been pushing this pretty hard in the last few days, and so far I've managed to clear a tier 16 on my hardcore rogue, and tier 17 and 18 also look within grasp. So a few things have changed in the setup, so I want to go through that. If you have seen my original guide, then you will know the basics of the build, but TLDR, we used Tybalt's Will with the Condemnation bug to get 22 combo points. That boosts your lucky hit chance to the moon. And like this, you can trigger poison, bursting venoms, all that stuff extremely easily. And you can make large pulls and decimate them. So this build has a lot of AoE damage output thanks to Penetrating Shot. And then you have the single target rapid fire to finish off elites and Bloodseekers later on. But so far, I've also been experimenting with a bunch of other skills. So I saw some people like, trying Caltrops, Poison Trap, Death Trap. I've also been doing these kind of things. And actually I stuck with Death Trap, which does have some pretty huge advantages. So you can see this here on my bar. With Death Trap, you are able to pull in enemies and then have them all stacked up for the penetrating shot to just shoot through this line of enemies, and also each of those enemies producing extra side arrows with a trick shot aspect. So this is an extremely powerful combo. However, it is quite prone to lagging, especially on the better maps like this one here. This is the second best monster type that you're fishing for if you try to do a high tier push. I've made my tier list about maps and monsters the other day, so you can check that out if you want. But basically, spiders are important because lots of extra density, lots of extra progression you get from those, and they can lag you out. So using this Death Trap very strategically is key to make sure you don't lag out and die. And you can see here, for example, even without using it, sometimes there are these like a few seconds lags or so when there's this super high density, because you produce like, 100 plus damage instances per second, and then everything is ticking with dots. And well, only once you start thinning out the density a little bit, it becomes safer. But you can see the power of this penetrating shot and this Death Trap combo in action here right now. You see those elites are melting. Like some of these elites I can dot up to death in a matter of like 5 to 10 seconds in T16. It's incredible how much damage output it has, and then you kind of finish them off when the density thins out. So this is where the rapid fire comes in. I want to show you some of those examples of this Death Trap in action. So here's, for example, there's a pull here. We have 3 elites, a bunch of small stuff, and the objective is always to hit the elites as much as possible, because the normal monsters just die. But you see here how fast I can dot up these enemies with insane poison ticks. You see on the timer we're at 9:32 minutes left. And I start shooting, there's a bit of lag. I pop the Death Trap after I've done like 2-3 shots or so. Everything gets pulled in that is still alive. And now you have this insane number of hits. You see this here, this is when the penetrating shot hits all of those little spiders. And you see here how I do insane amounts of damage to this guy. And you see here, even without poison actually doing a lot of work, just the arrow portion of the skill already like almost decimates this elite. And then you have this insane poison ticking. Most of the damage is the poison from Poison Imbue, but you see here in a matter of like 6-7 seconds or so, I dotted these guys up and they're gonna die. So this is basically what's happening here in those ridiculously like large pulls. Of course, you don't always have this damage output. This has extreme density scaling with the way that you proc your trick shot arrows, and how you have to have more damage with more targets. It's a bit like Diablo 3 area damage, basically. And yeah, some of those poison ticks can be ridiculously high. So if you look at how much they're actually ticking for, maybe you can see some numbers here. It's like 65 million, 43 million poison ticks. And this can go way higher. So even in this run here, I found another spot where I did like 200 million poison ticks or so. Maybe you can find that here. It's a pretty insane amount of poison damage you can do sometimes. I think this is this situation here. So let's see if you can see those numbers. But you see here, again, I've done the Death Trap. I've pulled them together. And you have like all these numbers here. And yeah, we see like 142 million there, for example. There's like a 76 million, 82 million. And you see here again, this ticks for 150 million. So yeah, those are the kind of values that you can expect when you have these like insanely tight pulls. And this is just with penetrating shot. And on single target, rapid fire can also do some massive damage output, where you can also produce like 100, 150 million poison ticks if you get lucky with those Condemnation and Tybalt's Will combo point procs. So maybe if you go further here to these Bloodseeker fights, you can see this in action. yeah, some of those poison ticks are pretty nasty here. You see 50 million, 66 million. And this thing is with the tracker glyph. So tracker glyph extends the poison duration by 33%. So this will tick for 8 seconds here with 90 million ticks, as you can see here. So I've probably dotted this guy up for like almost 1 billion damage or like 500 million damage or something like that. And this is not even as high as it can get. So I saw like some ticks sometimes like 150 million or so on single target. So you can do some pretty nasty single target damage as well. And I can kill the Bloodseekers on tier 16 in roughly 40 to 60 seconds on a decent fight each. So I need roughly like 3 minutes or so is kind of the expectation to defeat those Bloodseekers, unless we have some that are really nasty, we have to dodge around a lot, and it can be even longer. But you can see that the damage is there, and then eventually I was able to complete this run. And right after that, I also jumped into tier 17, try it out, and it's still working like a charm because of this insane density scaling. If stuff just lives longer, but there's like a lot of density, you kind of more easily progress through to the higher tiers with this build, as long as you get like these spider monster types. So skellies and spiders is by far the best for this because of this density that they have. And like this, I'm able to push higher and higher, and I think I might actually hit even up to tier 18 or 19 without leveling my glyph further if I keep trying. So at least that's kind of the expectation for now. And I also want to walk you through the setup. I have the planner here. I did some updates on this. So that's the original pen RF planner here. And I did a few more setups here. So previously we had like the normal version here. This was without Uber Uniques. And if you have enough armor on your items, you can actually get away without having to run the disobedience aspect. You see here the setup has 14,000 armor. You want to have roughly 13.7k, and this is achievable without disobedience. So just with like 3% armor rolls and skulls and a bunch of stuff on the paragons, you can hit that. You can also fine tune this a little bit in some cases. For example, I didn't actually take all of the armor nodes that you could. So make sure you hit that armor value depending on your gear. But around 13.5 to 13.7k is what you're aiming for. And this is always true. So for example, there's also this uber unique version where I think I did put disobedience here, but it is actually possible to play this without disobedience. In my case, I'm actually running Doombringer and the Harlequin Crest, and I don't have disobedience aspect. I have Might and Umbrus, and I'm running an Iron Skin Elixir, which is, you know, one way to do this basically. But you see here, it's 11.8k armor because you lose the helm that has a % armor roll. So that's kind of like the main downside of Harlequin Crest, but it is a pretty strong offensive item and gives you a bunch of damage reduction that is also kind of helpful. So I like running with this to push higher. And if you have this, then yeah, if you can't solve your armor problem, then you can run Disobedience. If you can, then you run Might aspect. So you can do this with Incense, with Iron Skin Potion, and this is what I'm doing at least. The Paragon doesn't really change between those different setups, so you can just look at, you know, what are the exact changes when you have Uber Uniques. So mostly I just replace one of the offensive aspects with a Doombringer. It's very helpful, and then I replace one of the defensive ones with the Harlequin Crest. And now here comes the high-end version that I was just playing in this video. So the two main differences here is we have the Death Trap. I explained that in detail, and there's also the Blade Shift. So you might have noticed this. I'm running Blade Shift. The main reason for that is it's quite a bit faster than Puncture. So Puncture has the advantage it makes enemies vulnerable and slowed, and it's a relatively fast generator, and it can still trigger Condemnation because you use your Condemnation to attack with Puncture, and like this you can trigger those combo points. But Blade Shift also does that because it's a melee skill, and it's roughly like, I don't know, 20-25% faster than Puncture. So if you try to stack up combo points, I've actually tested this on a target dummy without Condemnation equipped. 22 combo points took me around 5.2 seconds with Blade Shift and around 7.5 seconds with Puncture. So this is the main reason to run Blade Shift. It also has some other small perks like reduced crowd control duration, and you can walk through enemies. So this can be useful sometimes. You can just kind of like walk into a pool and, you know, you don't get stuck and stuff like that. So there is a bit of an advantage here and a bit of movement speed as well. So that is kind of nice, and you have these faster cycles. And the way that I attack in these runs is that I just like Blade Shift like once or two times or so, and then Pen Shot, Blade Shift, Pen Shot, Blade Shift, Pen Shot, etc. So you kind of try to do very fast cycles. You don't really have resource issues because of this insane lucky hit that Penetrating Shot has with 22 combo points. Even like a single point in innervation is enough to just constantly refill your energy in these pulls. So you don't need to worry about anything here. So this is kind of like the main changes I made. I replaced Dash and Puncture with Blade Shift and Death Trap. And then a few tweaks on the Paragon boards. So previously I had this set up a little bit differently. Now we have actually 5 glyphs. So previously I had only 4 glyphs. And I also removed the Cunning Stratagem board. So you might have seen my other video where I was showing what happens with Cunning Stratagem. TLDR, your pen shot goes from like around 300% lucky hit to roughly 900% lucky hit, which is kind of crazy, but ultimately not really that much more useful than just having 300% lucky hit. So I removed Cunning Stratagem and I put in Eldritch Bounty, basically for pretty much the same points. So this was down here. And then I also had Exploit Weakness board, just for the extra 15% damage and a bit of armor and damage reduction. But ultimately I replaced this with No Witness board and we put an extra glyph instead. So there's a bunch of damage here. This has nice double dipping with poison. And then we have a bunch of life here and this is buffed. So this kind of gives us similar defense and we have an extra glyph effect, which is kind of nice in the end. So this is what I did there. And this allowed me to get in the tracker glyph. Now I'm not 100% sure about the tracker glyph, but there seems to be something going on that is kind of inexplicable, and maybe this is just how the game works and everything is working fine. I've been trying to pinpoint what exactly is going on, but basically it seems to kind of do something that is out of the ordinary, but maybe this is just a UI bug. So what I'm talking about is I've been watching some other rogues, and I saw a bunch of people using the tracker glyph. And if you don't know the tracker glyph, it seems very powerful with this 33% longer poison, but what actually happens is that this 33% longer poison only does something when you don't attack the target anymore. So this means if you continuously attack the target and stack up more and more poison, this effect does nothing. And only after you let the entire poison run its course, it will be extended by 33% duration, doing a bit more damage towards the end. So this is not just like a 33% extra poison DPS kind of glyph. Instead, the secondary effect does literally nothing. This has been tested many times, and well, it doesn't improve the actual like DPS or anything like that. You don't stack up longer poisons and then they ramp up together. It just does what I just explained. But something is kind of going on, I think, because I watched this clear here. This is like from, I think, a Chinese player, and he did a tier 15, and he was using the tracker glyph. And there is this situation here where he's fighting the last Bloodseeker. And, well, you see that the health bar shows how much poison is on a target. You have the bright red, that is like the remaining HP after the entire dots have passed. And this dark red, this is like the portion of how much health this guy has as poison on him, right? So if you just wait like 10 seconds here, this guy should go down here from like 55% HP to 50 or so. This is basically what we see here. But watch this. When he stops attacking after this is the last rapid fire right now. This guy has like roughly 40% life left. And if you let the poison run its course, maybe 30%, you see that here. And now this guy is not attacking. He's dashing. He's doing like a metamorph. He's doing like a blade shift and a caltrop. And here comes the next attack. And you see how much poison damage this guy has taken. And that is kind of like not explicable to me. So basically in the matter of like, you know, just 3-4 seconds of jumping around and doing nothing, this Bloodseeker just went from like 40% HP to like 15% HP, and he still has more poison on him that will kill him. So I actually took like screenshots of this here. This is like the before and after. So this is like the last attack basically, before the, you know, the pause, basically the break, where he no longer attacks with rapid fire. You see here, this is before and after. It's a pretty crazy amount of poison damage, and I thought it may have something to do with the tracker glyph, maybe doing something that it's not supposed to. I couldn't really pinpoint it so far because, yeah, it's kind of hard to do that in just like, you know, some runs. I've been trying to place damage numbers on, like in this run here, for example, and it just seems like everything is working correctly, and it may simply be that there is actually that much poison on the target after like various attacks. So when you instantly see like he's attacking, he's like ramping up the poison, and the poison has an 8 seconds duration. So it might just be that there is so much poison on the target and this UI is just not showing it properly. So this could also just be what is happening here. because most of the damage on this build is poison damage, and maybe everything is just working fine. But it was kind of like weird and something that struck me. But outside of that, even if there's no bug or, you know, no weird like higher damage output or something with the tracker glyph, the tracker glyph is actually not that bad to use after all. So let's say that everything is working correctly. It still has its advantages because it can kind of just like dot up a target, and then, you know, if you kind of like understand how much the poison is ticking for, you can just walk away from the target and let it tick for 8 more seconds until the target dies. So there's like one of those situations here where I see, okay, this guy has like, you know, 10% life left, and now I shoot and I just walk away now, and the guy just dies behind me. This was actually kind of like too early, or like rather too late. You can definitely walk away much earlier. But in some other cases against elites, for example, when I have these like big balls of elites and I just dot them up with some crazy dots here, sometimes you can just walk away and they will die behind you. So it's kind of the advantage of the tracker glyph. You save some seconds of DPSing, and here you will see this, for example, that yeah, once I know that they are pretty close to dying, I can just like kind of walk here. And you see here this guy on the right, he's just like, I didn't attack him for a while. And here this guy as well, you just walk away and then let him like dot to death basically. So that's kind of the advantage of the tracker glyph. I want to try also maybe a Bane glyph here that gives us just pure 10% extra poison damage. But ultimately I think it's like kind of like a close choice. You could even run something like Turf if you want to have a bit of like a defensive choice. But yeah, this is a few options here basically. Now one last important thing I want to mention here is the item and skill swap on the Bloodseeker spawn. So when the run is over, you spawn the 3 Bloodseekers, and at least on the higher tiers, like at tier 16 or so, I mentioned I need like roughly like up to a minute or so to kill one of those Bloodseekers in a 1v1. So I need like a lot of time, and 3 minutes is like the absolute minimum requirement to have a chance, and I will do some swaps here. So basically what I do is I swap in a smoke grenade. We don't need penetrating shot anymore. I swap out the death trap, which for concealment. Death trap does nothing on these guys. And we also go puncture with pestilent points. So I replace the trick shot aspect with the pestilent points aspect, because I noticed that trying to do this with blade shift, most of the time these guys that they teleport away, they run away from you. I don't get bursting venom procs, and without bursting venom procs, like you just can't really do the poison combo properly. So I actually did a few changes here on the single target fights, because sometimes I had like 4 minutes for these Bloodseekers and I could not do it because I had really annoying ones that would just like move around all the time. And this actually adds a bunch of consistency to the setup, because I do get these bursting venom procs here from attacking with my puncture. Like this, we also still proc the slow, so we get like crowd control effects. We get damage reduction from slowed enemies, for example, from the puncture. And even though what I just explained earlier with puncture being like a slower basic attack than blade shift, it felt much more consistent to me, and I'm going to keep going with this. So I do have this setup as well, the item and skill swap on the Bloodseekers, so you can see this exactly here. But basically, you take like 10 seconds, 20 seconds to respec when a Bloodseeker spawn, at least in the higher tiers, like tier 15 plus, I would recommend this, just so they have an easier time. And you see that the skill tree is just a bit different. So you move from mixed to blended poison imbuement for the single target, and then we remove the death trap, and that goes into the smoke grenade, basically. Here, this is this one. And then we have the concealment. The concealment is kind of nice because you can engage the Bloodseekers and you can like more easily spread them out to be like a 1v1, because sometimes they come all together and it's kind of hard to like kite them around until there's only one of them. And concealment actually allows you to like leave them behind more easily and then re-engage like a single guy and just 1v1 them. So this is why there's concealment instead of the death trap. And also sometimes it can be useful to trigger your T-Boss will, for example, for the unstoppable, even in the middle of the fight, if you don't want to use the Shadow Step, for example. But you do have to use the Shadow Step regularly here to proc close quarters combat. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, this is basically the change here. And then you equip one different item here. I have a second ring that I equip with pestilent points instead of trick shot aspect, because there's no penetrating shot on single target. Also, one thing that I started using on all of those setups is Fists of Fate. So previously I used to have X-Files ring here. So this was kind of like the combo with this super high lucky hit with penetrating shot, where the idea was that if you have like 1000% lucky hit, then every single enemy hit will produce bursting venoms effects, and there's gonna be like 20 poison puddles on the ground, and each of those poison puddles actually can trigger X-Files explosions. But it turns out the X-Files explosions are just not really strong enough anymore in those higher tiers, As you saw, I dot enemies up for like 100 million per tick, and an X-File explosion is maybe like 2 to 5 million or so a pop. It's just not really good enough. And on top of this, it turns out that bursting randoms can only appear 3 times per shot. So even if you hit like 20 targets and you have basically a guaranteed proc on all of them, you only get 3 poison puddles. So this also massively reduces the value of this X-Files and bursting randoms combo with the penetrating shot. So in that case, we actually started experimenting with Fists of Fate, and I really like them. So this gives you like an average damage bonus of 50% from the effect. And you have this lucky hit that gives you up to like roughly 90% extra damage, because this normal percent damage applies twice to poisons. So 90% additive damage is roughly like a 7, 8, 9% damage increase or so. So this is roughly equivalent to what an attack speed roll could do, for example. So we lose the 4 ranks to the skills, but especially if we have a Shaco, that is only like a 21% damage downgrade. Even without a Shaco, it's like 26 or something, but you gain 50% on average from the effect. So it is kind of like a worthy upgrade here. It also has chance to mobilize and daze, which is something you kind of have to be aware of, but it does make some fights safer. But on the other hand, you can also immobilize enemies when you don't want them to. And I'm going to show this in action real quick. So the Fist of Fate is a bit of an important thing to play around. So basically what I do is when I try to pull like a few enemies together, usually I push forward a little bit to try to find like elites and some packs, or maybe potentially like a double elite pack. And you see, I'm not attacking. I'm not using pen shot for a little while until all of these guys have moved into a better position. And here, once they are stacked up, I start shooting, because as soon as you do your first penetrating shot, everything will be mobilized, everything will be dazed, nothing moves together anymore. And I explained the importance of using the death trap to pull enemies together for the bigger damage. So you want to make sure that the enemies are kind of like grouped up a little bit already before you start attacking and before you do the death trap. And another thing to keep in mind is that with the death trap, you have only 5 seconds after engaging before enemies become unstoppable. So at least the elites, they can be CC'd for 5 seconds and then they become unstoppable for 8 seconds. So if you start attacking and you try to thin out the pull a little bit, you have to do that in like the first 4 seconds of a fight, and then is the very latest we can use the death trap, because otherwise they will not get pulled in because they're unstoppable. Or you wait until the second cycle, so you can wait until 13 seconds into the fight when the first unstoppable drops and they can be CC'd again. So this is a second option you can do. But this is just something to keep in mind when you play with Death Trap and Fist of Fate. Either way, this is it for my update on the Pen RF build. So this is what I'm playing with so far. So as I said, I'm expecting to clear maybe up to like 17, 18 or so with my, I think I have a little 14 glyph or something. So basically nothing. And yeah, somewhere around that level we'll probably start capping out without going further with like leveling the glyph, etc. So let's see what I can do, and I'll keep you guys updated with some of those clear runs. So far I'm very happy with the results. If you are looking for more details on the build, I do have the full build guide from like the previous version where you know, I had like slightly tweaked paragons and so on. But at least you will understand more of the build by watching my original build guide. So I didn't explain like every single detail now with like item stat priorities, etc. here, and this might be worth checking out for you if you are completely unfamiliar with the build. But for now, this is what I got. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I wish you good luck with your rogue in Abattoir of Zir. Personally, I had a really good time playing this build. I enjoyed it much more than Twisting Blades. I also tried Twisting Blades. I just like Pen Shot more. But either way, both these builds can be played at pretty much the same level, so you can choose which one you want. That's it for this video here. Good luck, and I'll see you guys next time.